Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
My name is Gregory Dunn. I was the former Secretary General of Harvard Model United Nations Boston, and I'd like to thank you all for having me here today. So my goal right now is to give you a sense of how we think about Model UN at Harvard, share with you some thoughts I have about preparing for Harvard, preparing for Model UN in general, and once that's complete, I would hope to give you some guidance as to how your school might begin starting on a Model UN program of their own. So if you'll forgive me while I set up my presentation, I will take this time as I prepare my presentation to offer you some brief initial thoughts on Harvard and our program at Harvard College. Harvard Model United Nations is one of the oldest Model UN programs out there, dating back to about 1927. And over the course of this time, between 1927 and 2016, we have had an opportunity to really think about what might make Model United Nations interesting and what might make it a worthy activity for students to often fly tens of thousands of miles to attend. In our minds, what really sets Model United Nations apart is that it's an opportunity to do something very difficult in a very short amount of time. I'm not here to come before you and to tell you that the journey you are about to embark upon is easy. In fact, there are aspects of it which are incredibly difficult. I am sure that you will often find times that will challenge you, that will force you to think about how you are as a student, how you are as a learner, and how you are as a teacher. But that's all the more valuable. Because at the end of the day, what Harvard Model United Nations and H1 generally will teach you is how to become a true leader within your school, within the Model UN setting, and within the world. And so with that in mind, I wanted to take an opportunity to briefly run through some of the fundamental aspects of Model United Nations. Model United Nations will often involve an environment where there are hundreds, if not 300, 400 people in a room, all wishing to speak. An environment where you are all wishing to speak can be incredibly challenging, because if everyone wants to talk, no one might be heard. Because of that, Model UN has a detailed set of rules of procedure. Now, because we have limited time here and we have very important tasks ahead of us, I won't really emphasize the rules of procedure beyond saying the most important thing you can do in Model United Nations is to speak up, to make yourself heard, to make people understand what your country's perspective is and why it might be valuable for the discussion at hand. So with that in mind, I will briefly describe how you might speak up in Model United Nations. It's really quite simple. Just say how long you'd like the group to talk, how long each person should talk, and what you'd like to talk about. For example, you might say, I propose a moderated caucus of 10 minutes with a 30-second speaker time on the topic of climate change. It's pretty straightforward, but there is often 10 or 15 pages of detail to it to help you understand the minutiae. One of the joys of starting a Model United Nations Club is you can work to develop your understanding of the skill, strategy, and tactics needed to really grab a hold of rules of procedure. And I hope the elections and inauguration of the club today will start you on that journey. But for now, since the most important thing in Model United Nations is speaking, I wanted to take a brief moment for us as a whole classroom to understand what a Model United Nations speech might involve. So to understand this, I usually find it best for students to really understand what it means to represent a country. So let's take the example of India at the 2015 Paris Climate Talks. At the 2015 Paris Climate Talks, Modi went with a very clear mission. They needed to represent the interests of India at the conference where the world's response to global warming would be decided. Now, there's several strengths that India has in this regard, right? They have low per person emissions, strong potential for renewable energy growth, and you're an incredibly large country. But because of the incredible largeness of India, there's a potential for the average Indian to emit more and more as India becomes more developed. Current efforts to get around that by building public transportation systems have unfortunately fallen somewhat short. So with that in mind, I wanted to take a few minutes for us as students to think about things we might include in a speech introducing India and introducing India's position at the climate talks at a Model United Nations conference. We're a fairly large classroom, so we won't spend too much time doing this, but if you could, break into groups of 10 or so, don't necessarily move chairs around, but just take an opportunity within yourselves to discuss what India might say to introduce themselves and set things up so that India will get what it wants from this conference. Why don't we take 3 or 4 minutes for you all to discuss, and then we'll briefly have a session where we write this speech together. So please discuss amongst yourselves.